In this demo, I'm going to cover users and groups. I'm back on my domain controller. I'm just going to go to my server manager. And in server manager, I'm going to go to tools and open Active Directory users and computers. These are all of my default objects. So we have some containers and organizational units, and I have some users and groups that exist by default. This is my administrator account. So all those exist by default. I have not created anything in here yet. What I'm going to do is create a new user. I have this users container that shows up. So I'm going to just right click that and go to new user. And I'm going to name my user Tony. We'll say Tony Roberts. And I'm going to set the username to be T Roberts. So that'll be the logon. When I go next, I need to set the password. Now this is always selected by default. User must change password at next logon. Normally that's exactly what you want to have happen because I don't want to know Tony's password, nor does Tony want me to know his password if I'm the IT person that created his user account. So now I would tell Tony what this password is. The first time Tony logs in, he'll use that password, but then it's going to prompt him to change it. Once he changes it, I have no idea what that password is, so I could never log in and impersonate Tony. I will deselect that here. User must change password at next logon, because naturally, since I have no Tony, I'm going to be logging in with all of these accounts. So I'm going to just deselect that. User must change password. The other option, which is not very common, user cannot change password. There is this password never expires. So right now, this password will expire every 42 days by default in Active Directory. Now, some companies will set this to be 30 days, 60, 90, are all pretty common, but most companies have some password expiration policy. The default, as I said, is 42 days. But if you don't want the password to expire, then you could just select this password never expires. And I could also disable Tony's account. If Tony's going to be out of the office for a while, you could simply say account is disabled. No way Tony can log in until someone comes back to his account and they deselect this. Account is disabled. Now Tony can log in. I'm just going to go next. And Tony has been created. So in the users container at the bottom here, you'll see Tony Roberts shows up. Now I could have done that same thing by clicking this icon here. It's the new user icon on the menu bar. It would just pull up that same window. I just normally right click because that's the way I've always done it. If I want to create a group, you could click here to create a new group on the menu bar, or you could right click your location, new group is in the list. I'm going to name this group Sales Users. Sales-users. So I have my Sales Users group. For now, we are not concerned about the group scope and group type. That's a concern when we start having multiple domains in the forests. So for now, we're not interested in that. It's beyond the scope of what we're talking about. So I'm just going to click OK, and my Sales Users group shows up. Now, let's say Tony works in sales. I can right click Tony's account and go to properties, and I get all these tabs here. One of these tabs is member of. This will show me every group that Tony is a member of. If I want to add Tony to a new group, I can just go to add, advanced, find now, and this gives me a list of all my groups. Well, I know I want to put Tony in sales users, so I'm just going to type SA and find now. And it just searches through and finds my sales users group. And we'll click OK. Tony will now be a member of this domain users. That's by default. All users belong to that group. But now he will also be a member of sales users, and I can just OK that. If I were to go to the group sales users and to the properties of that, there is a members tab. On this members tab, it shows you everyone that is a member of this group. So right now we can see Tony Roberts as a member. Now I could have, from the group point of view, clicked add and I could have searched, and I could have selected Tony Roberts from here. So you can do this either direction, from the group point of view or from the user point of view. But now Tony is a member of that group. The benefit to what we just did, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to name it Sales Data. So that's my new folder. I'm going to go to Properties, the Security, and I'm going to click Edit here. And you'll see right now, the only groups or users that have any level of access would be the System Administrator, that user account. That's the account I'm actually using now. And Administrators, the group. I'm going to add. So now I can add whoever I want, users, groups, to have access to this folder. I'm going to click Find Now, and this gives me a list of all my users. Now that's too much to search through. So I'm just going to type TO and Find Now. Tony Roberts is in the list. Now, what you could do is you could add Tony Roberts, and you could click OK. I could say Tony needs a certain level of access to this folder. So I'm going to just leave this read and a few others selected. Well, I can click OK, and Tony will have read access to this folder. The problem, tomorrow we have another user that needs access. So then I would have to come back to this folder and I'd have to add Sarah. And then it's 10 users, and then it's 20, and then it's 30. This could become unmanageable if you added users individually to like every folder that they require access to. So we don't do that. I'm going to remove Tony. I'm going to add, and we're going to add that sales users group. So here, I'm just going to type SA, I actually typed SAL. But when I check names, you'll see sales users shows up in the list. If there were multiples that match that, like if I just typed S and hit check names, it would give you a list of every user group that starts with S, and you just select whichever one is appropriate. But I'm going to choose my sales users, and I'll OK. Sales users, they have read access. The benefit to this, every user that I ever make a member of this group will now have read access to this folder. So I'm not concerned about managing individual users and what they have access to. You make sure they are in the appropriate group. That group has access to whatever resources they need, and you would be done. Pretty neat. Now, I don't actually have a need for that folder, so I will just delete it, so it does not clutter my desktop there. But that's our users and groups in Active Directory, users and computers.